everyone. Welcome in to the 5 Reasons podcast. Thank you for downloading this in case you have. We wanted to use our Friday space to sell you on something that we've been working on quite a bit here in the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is our Patron feed. It's only $3 a month if you want extra content from us, although we are certainly producing a great deal of content. If you want a little bit extra, and also we're selling more immediacy at the moment. When the Heat play a game, when breaking news happens, we try to have something up on the Patron feed immediately. So the way that you can subscribe to it is patron.podbean.com/5reasonsports. We'll link to it in the episode. By the way, thanks to our podcast provider, Podbean, for offering this to us. It's $3 a month if you want to subscribe to extra content. We've been doing a lot of commentaries and a lot of extra interviews that we have had over the course of the last few weeks and reacting to breaking news. So over the course of this episode, we're actually going to provide some of that content for free. We want for this to be the selling point, for this to be the way in which you're going to subscribe. Although we're actually going to begin with something that is an original piece of content we have not put on Patreon. Ethan Skolnick managed to catch up with Mike Hoffman, a forward for the Florida Panthers, on what he thinks of playing hockey in South Florida, what he thinks of the Panthers and everything going on at the moment. So we'll begin with Mike Hoffman of the Florida Panthers.
All right, Ethan Skolnick here at the BB&T Center with new Panthers forward. I guess it's still okay to call you new Panthers forward, even though you've been here for a couple months at this stage, Mike Hoffman. And as we're doing this podcast, Mike has 26 points in 26 games, had a big point-scoring streak. The Panthers trying to get themselves back in the playoff mix, getting a lot closer to it in their conference. And first, Mike, I just want to start here. What has the transition been like for you so far? Not just on the ice, obviously, we're going to get to know new teammates, but just getting used to South Florida.
Yeah, it's been great. I got acquired in trade this summer, so coming in, whole new organization, whole new teammates, and it's been awesome so far. The owner, GM, coaches, players, the staff, everyone's been nothing but welcoming to me, and it's been in a very easy transition. Obviously, it takes a little bit to get used to a new team, new systems, and find your comfort level. But I think things are going in the right way as of now.
What was, when you were acquired, what was the expectation level that was sort of given to you by Coach Brugner, by Dale Talon and others in the organization? What did they say they wanted from you down here?
Well, they knew I was a shooter. That's kind of my biggest asset. Obviously, I got to be putting points on the board. That's my responsibility, and try and help out on the power play and 5-on-5 game as much as I can.
Let's go back to the beginning here, and I'm going to acknowledge I've been to some of these places because I took a scouting trip for the newspaper with Scott Luce, who used to run scouting down here for the Panthers. So we went into a bunch of these little towns, but can you go through a little bit all the places you played in junior hockey and kind of what stood out to you about those particular places? What's it for people who don't understand what it's like? What is it like to play at that level?
It's like a little minor development league for professional hockey. You're playing just as many games as in the professional level, but you're playing against teenagers, and they try and develop you and get you ready for once you do make that step into the professional leagues, whether it's the NHL or the minor leagues. For myself, I had to spend a good chunk of my career in the AHL to develop my game, and I think it was a big part of where I am today.
So I spent some time in Drummondville. For someone who's never been to Drummondville before, what is Drummondville like? Yeah,
it was, really French city. So the language was a little bit difficult, but all the hockey and the coaching was done in English, so that was great. The billets I had were bilingual, so they could, obviously communicate with me, and I was rooming with a player from Montreal, so he could speak English as well. Another player that lived in Hamilton, so he was an Ontario boy, so obviously he was English as well. So, that was put in a good situation for myself.
How much French have you picked up over the years?
Playing in the Quebec League for 3 years, I was able to start to understand a little bit. I can still pick up on, a decent amount, especially, if we're talking hockey-wise. So sometimes you can catch the French guys if they're trying to talk about you.
I mean, was there a lot of trash talking at you in French? Just so you would react to it right
not too
away?
much, but if people are speaking a different language, it can sometimes be there.
Yeah, I was going to say, whose game when you were growing up as a kid, growing up in Ontario, whose game did you emulate?
I loved the Detroit Red Wings growing up as a kid. They were a very good team, so obviously easy to cheer for. And as a kid, that's what you kind of liked, the winning teams. But Steve Yzerman was my favorite player when I was growing up. A great two-way forward, won Stanley Cup. So he was probably my favorite player.
I always ask this question of athletes once they get to this level, but when did you realize that you had a sort of a gift for this? At what age did you recognize, this is something I can actually continue to do and might be something that actually becomes a career for me?
Yeah, at a young age, I was a pretty good player. But I mean, it's a long ways to get to this point. So you just got to keep working at your game. I always believed in myself and had confidence in my abilities that I was good enough to play in this league. Just a matter of time and developing my game and then getting the right opportunities. There's a lot of good players out there that could probably be playing in this league, but whether it's they just didn't figure it out or given the right chances or opportunities, a lot of those things take a big part.
Where did the shot come from? How did you develop that?
To be honest, I shot a lot of pucks as a kid. I was, really energetic and could never really be sitting still. So, before dinner, after dinner, in the summers, always outside playing road hockey or shooting pucks in the garage, just working on it as much as I could. And then obviously throughout the years, continuing, to work on your shot and your technique and how to use your stick, how to use the kick points and the flex is a big part as well.
Who was on the other end of that? Do you have brothers, sisters? Who was absorbing the worst of that as you're shooting the puck all the time?
Probably the garage doors or any fridges that were in the garage. They would sometimes take a beating.
Yeah, some of those had to be replaced.
Yeah, a few of the garage doors did, especially the ones going into the house.
Go now to entering the NHL. Obviously, you were drafted, then you went back. I played at St. John, another place that I was at on that trip that I went to. So, what was sort of your welcome? Because you started right away scoring some goals, which a lot of guys don't do when they first get in the league. What was kind of your welcome to the NHL moment? Was there a moment on the ice where you recognized, I'm here and this is different?
Yeah, I think I'll always remember even just my first exhibition game, going out there for warm-up. We were in Ottawa at the time, at home, playing against the Montreal Canadiens, and, you're wearing an NHL jersey, and you got the Montreal Canadiens on the other side. So I think that, I wasn't an NHLer at that point, but, my first kind of exhibition game and the taste of how it is was a big eye-opener.
And I know you said you always believed that you could get to this point, but once you get to this point, were there moments where you're like, oh, this is something I need to get better at if I'm going to stay here? Like, what were sort of maybe the flaws you saw in your own game when you first came up that you needed to get to a certain level?
Yeah, my offensive abilities were always there. I was always a point producer, goal scorer, so that was never really a question. Obviously, completing a two-way game and being able to play on the defensive side of the puck and being reliable in your own end and knowing when to make the right play and limit the turnovers as much as possible was a big step that I had to take in my game.
We talk about forwards who can play on the other end. Obviously, you play with one now in Barkov, who's as good as anybody in the NHL at doing that. Is that more of a physical thing, or is that more of a mental thing? Because sometimes they say, oh, I wish he was better in his own end, and the question is, does he have the physical capability to do that, or is that just an effort thing? I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about NHL players in general. What goes into that?
I think each player has to find it for themselves. Obviously for me, I'm not really going to be able to outmuscle too many of the other, defensive guys out there. So I need to kind of use my skills as my ability to strip pucks, and but it's a bit of both. Obviously, you got to be strong on the puck at times, but you need to be able to think the game and be able to read the plays, and that's why I think Barkov is so good at the defensive side of the game, because he's a big body. He's got a great stick. He can intercept pucks. He can strip pucks from guys, and he reads the game and sees it very well.
So you come down here and season starts, and I know at first there were some line changes and trying to kind of figure out who the best combinations would be. What clicked for you where you go on this point-scoring streak? Was there something in terms of the connection with teammates, just getting comfortable here in the room or in the area? But what kind of came together there?
Yeah, obviously, to start the season, I knew I had to establish myself in a new team and kind of find my role. And it took a few games definitely for that to happen. But to go on a point streak like that, there was a few of the games where you get a lucky bounce. For myself, that ends up being a point, and those are the kind of things that you need to happen in order to make a point streak that long.
Are you superstitious at all when you're going through the streak? Are you one of these? Because I know hockey players can be superstitious.
Yeah, not really. I tried not to be. I mean, I have a little bit in the past, but trying to get away from that because it's just a mind game at that point.
Right, and like you said, I mean, I think with anything, I think when guys go through struggles the other way, you could be playing really well and not producing points, right? That's probably happened to you over the course of your career. When you've gone through slumps, when it's been the other direction, how do you typically get yourself out of them?
Yeah, obviously, I think the course of a season is a big roller coaster ride. There's a lot of ups and downs. You win a few games, everyone's feeling good, and you're going to lose a few games too. And you never want to get your mentality, too high or too low. I try and keep myself at a even level. Whether you have a bad game or a good game, you got to try and forget about it and move on to the next and learn from what you guys did on the ice in the past and just try and continue on moving forward.
One of the things, having been around the Panthers for a long time, I mean, I covered the '96 team that went to the finals, and then there's been sort of a drought here in terms of getting the playoffs consistently. As you look at the room, do you want to take more of a leadership role as you get more comfortable? Are you starting to sort of feel that a little bit? Because it always feels like this team gets close, and then it's about a month left in the season, and there's games in hand. We always hear that phrase, and then falls just short of making the postseason. Are there things you see at this point that you can sort of help them get over the line this time?
Yeah, obviously it's never easy to make the playoffs in this league. There's so many good teams, and it's a battle every single year to get into the playoffs. So I think it's just the biggest thing is consistency. We're getting the guys in the room to be focused and take every game, like it is our turning point, and you need those extra 2 points, 3 points that'll get you into the playoffs. Because as you saw last year, I know I wasn't here, but they're 1 point shy. That's just a shootout win or tying a game in the third to put you into overtime to get you that extra point. So it is very close. I know it's still fairly early in the season, but every point is crucial.
All right, I'm going to take you through some of your new teammates here and kind of what you learned. I'm not as interested in the on-the-ice stuff. I'm more interested in kind of what you learned about them off the ice so far. Old man Luongo, what have you learned about Roberto?
You can tell he's been around for a long time, very professional, has a ton of respect, really nice guy. He can crack some jokes too, so he's, definitely a guy that everybody looks up to, especially, he's been hurt a little bit this season, but every time he comes back, it seems like it gives that extra jolt to the team that's needed.
He's got odd music taste. Have you come across any of that?
I haven't, no.
Okay. Let's ask him about that because it's all over the place. Barkov, have you been able to bring him out of his shell at all a little bit?
Yeah, Barky is he's a next level professional player. Knows exactly what he needs to get himself ready. Goes about his business. He's not the most talkative, but he definitely leads by example. He's constantly working at his game. He wants to be on the ice as much as he can. He spends a lot of time in the gym and taking care of his body, which is definitely needed in this league, and goes to show why he's had such good success.
Is there one sequence, one play, something he's done on the ice where I know because you're focusing on yourself, obviously, but you're just like, oh my God, like that's not something that normal humans do.
I think the biggest thing is how he can strip pucks and get the puck going the other way from the defensive zone into the offense. So me as a winger playing on his line, I'm always getting ready to, if he does get that puck down low, I'm looking to take off right away because we don't spend too much time in our D zone when he's on the ice because is so well down low, and they don't usually generate too many chances when he's out there. So his defensive game is what I was really impressed by.
He doesn't ever get called for a penalty either. It's remarkable. Like somebody who's stripping as many pucks as he is.
It's just it's having a good stick.
Yeah.
But you would think there'd be more times than not where you have your stick in between their guy's stick and might get called for a hook, or they might step on it. But he's really good with it, so I think that goes to show.
You have a sniper's mentality. You always have. The only complaint I ever hear about Barkov from fans is that sometimes he needs to be a little bit more selfish. Do you? That sometimes he'll have a shot, but he'll pass it up. I assume as a winger playing with him, that's not a bad thing because you're the recipient of that at times. But do you ever want him to be just more sort of take charge because he has the ability to do that?
Yeah, I think that's just the nature of how he is. He is more of a pass-first guy unless you get him on a breakaway. But you're not really going to change a guy that much. You can try and give him teaching points or tell him to shoot a little bit more. But a guy like that, you just kind of have to let play and let his offensive instincts take over. One
more, Huberdeau. What have you learned about him since you've been here?
Yeah, Huberdeau, again, he's a really good player. He's very crafty with the puck and an excellent passer, as you've seen in the last couple of games. He's been on fire as of late, accumulating a bunch of points, and he's very smart, very poised with the puck, so it's a good player to have. Jeff does, playing with him has been great, but whatever line he's on, he's always controlling the play and making the smart plays and setting people up.
All right, let's do some rapid fire here to close. One goaltender that you see on a breakaway that would give you potentially the most trouble. Who's the goalie you have the most respect for in that situation?
I think Carey Price is one of them. Ben Bishop is another that I've had struggles scoring on. So obviously in Ottawa, I played Montreal a lot, so Price is one of the best goalies in the league, so he'd probably be the number one.
Shootout situation. How do you mentally get yourself in the right sort of mind space there, and kind of what is your approach? Do you make your decision before you go? Is sometimes the decision made after you go? How do you approach that?
Yeah, for myself, I think for most players, they know exactly what move they're going to do before they even step on the ice. We have tons of video that we go through before the game showing the other goalies' tendencies and what might be an option for us as we're coming down on him. So, we go over those things before the game, and we definitely have either a shot or a deke set in mind.
After it, how long do you think about it? If you get stoned on a shootout, how long is it in your head?
Oh, not too long. I mean, shootouts are fun, but there's not too many players that are over 30%. So if you think of that, you try to. That's what can make it a little bit easier on your mind.
It's kind of like a baseball batting average,
yeah,
a little bit in that regard. Hold on, one more. This one. Hardest check you've taken at any level?
Probably the one I broke my collarbone when I was in the AHL and had rehab. I came back and probably wasn't ready to play at that point, but it was one of my first call-ups. It was in Boston, and it came down the wall, and Dougie Hamilton just finished me off behind the net. Not a very big hit, but still big enough that it refractured my collarbone again.
All right, a couple of more quick things. What should be your theme music when you score a goal?
I would have to think, some hip-hop, probably throw Drake in there.
All right, so that's okay. Well, that makes you millennial, because that was going to be my next question. Yeah. You are a millennial. What is the most millennial thing about you?
Probably I'm, one of those guys that likes to play a few video games on my downtime. I know they're very popular these days, so that'd probably be it.
What's the video game of choice?
Call of Duty right now.
Okay, Call of Duty. So you're not playing NHL games. You don't play with yourself on there.
No sports. No, I haven't played NHL in years. It's more so the shooting games.
All right, and you've been here long enough now. You have one restaurant recommendation in this area? If you found a spot?
Yeah, a few days ago, I went down to restaurant called Lobster Bar down on Las Olas in Fort Lauderdale, and it was a great spot. I think that's my favorite one so far.
And the adjustment overall to South Florida, just it's very different in terms of, in Ottawa you're going to get recognized. You got recognized everywhere, right? Was that fair to say?
Yeah. Probably in Ottawa is, probably once a day if you're going out for dinner, to the grocery store, to the mall, whatever it is, more times than not.
How often does it happen here so far?
It's happened once since I've been here, and it was just this past week. So it's a little different, but it's not a bad thing.
So you were recognized. So how does that come about? You're out somewhere. Hey, that's Mike Hoffman. You're wearing Panthers gear? Or?
No. I don't wear Panthers gear away from the rink. I was just leaving one of the restaurants on game day after my pregame meal, and another, I think he was about maybe 18 years old. They recognized me, wanted to get a picture, so definitely wasn't a problem.
So which extreme do you like better? Do you like the extreme of everybody knowing your business and knowing who you are, or do you like the extreme of being able to do whatever you want, or is there sort of a happy medium that you'd like to find?
I think for myself, I like it better kind of flying under the radar and just go about your business, but there is that happy medium. It's not a bad thing when people recognize you or want to come up to you and get an autograph or a picture. So I'm okay with either.
And are you a sports fan in other ways or no?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Since living in the States now, obviously football's big, so follow that a little bit more. Like to watch the playoffs are great in NBA and baseball, but big golfer, so obviously Florida's nice for that. I know our schedule has been extremely busy, so I haven't had too many opportunities to play.
What's the handicap now?
In the summer, it's around a 3. So now it's probably a little higher than that.
What is it about all of you hockey players? All of you can golf. That's the guys from other sports. NBA guys go out there, and it's Charles Barkley shooting 60 over par. All of you.
It's obviously the same swinging motion as shooting a puck, and we get a lot of time in the off season. Obviously, it's the summers that we have our downtime. So, usually my routine would be work out in the morning, and then you have the afternoon to do something. So usually I try and play around or so.
Final thing, and Mike Hoffman here again, 26 points, first 26 games for the Panthers, trying to get them into the playoffs this year. One thing about you that most people don't know.
I have 2 dogs.
What are their names?
Murphy and Maui.
Where did that come from?
From Ontario. They're French bulldogs.
Oh, no, I know that. The names, Murphy and Maui.
I don't know. Nowhere in particular. Just keep the M's in the family.
I got you. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, Mike Hoffman. Again, come check him out here at BB&T Center. One of the really good acquisitions in South Florida this year, and again, off to a hot start this season. Thanks for doing it, Mike.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
I want to tell you about another great event we're having for the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And to me, this is our coolest event yet, because this is the one that you can involve your kids in. You're not just watching the game, you're also watching them play. It's going to be at Gecko Parks in Weston. That's 3305 Corporate Avenue in Weston. This is a brand new facility. I've been there a bunch of times. My daughter loves to go. I feel like she's at a birthday party there every week, because when parents come and see the place, they're like, yeah, this is the place we're going to have a birthday party. They've got trampolines, they've got dodgeball, they've got basketball, they've got games, they've got ropes course, they've got virtual reality now too. They've got great pizza and wings, and also they have rock climbing. And here's the deal. If you show up anytime between 12 and 4, this is on Sunday the 16th, this upcoming Sunday, show up and say 5 reasons, buy a day pass, and you will get free rock climbing against your child. This is a $20 value. You can challenge your child. Do whatever you want to do. It's going to be a great time. So we'll have all the games on, Sunday ticket, Dolphins, Vikings, Gecko Parks in Weston.
Now let's get to some of the Patron content. We had a lot of good stuff this week, including daily recaps of the Miami Heat's West Coast trip. So we wanted to have you covered in case you fell asleep for the 10:30 start between the Heat and the Lakers, or, tuned off the Heat Jazz game after it was 40-15 after the first quarter. And that is actually where we're going to begin. Our friend Brass Jazz, the voice of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, it was his turn to recap the game for Miami Heat beat, and so he decided to make a little bit of a turn with it.
It feels like it's Utah. Utah Jazz, Utah Jazz. Beat. Utah Jazz, Utah Jazz. Utah Jazz, Utah Jazz. Beat. Utah Jazz, 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 Jazz. Welcome to the Utah Jazz Podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Knoxville. And with me today, it's just me. Because everyone else in Utah goes to sleep really early. But I stayed up. Don't tell my parents. So tonight, the Utah Jazz beat the Miami Heat 111-84. It wasn't even close. What was Miami doing? They weren't even trying. Their top scorer was Rodney Magruder. His name is whiter than mine. Folks, this one wasn't even close. Not ever. We definitely didn't look like a team that's below 500. We look like the Golden State flippin' Warriors. We nearly had double the assists, rebounds, steals, and blocks. The Heat couldn't get anything going. Between you and me, it looked like the coach was trying to lose. Some of those lineups, woof. We couldn't miss. Miami was... All right. Enough of the act. This game sucked. On paper, this seemed like a perfect thing for me to cover because I'm Brass Jazz, it's the Utah Jazz, and the Miami Heat have smoked the Jazz the last few times he played, and they seemed like they were trending upwards, like the Heat were starting to play well again. But in all reality, holy shit, this was an abomination. Top to bottom, this was awful. There wasn't one moment of this game where I enjoyed myself. Now, I've said before on Heat Beat that this season is really weird to me because no matter if the Heat win or if they lose, people are going to find a reason to bitch about it. And I find that to be f***ing exhausting. But this starting lineup, man, I just don't get it. Dragic is out. I get it. He's hurt. Or they say he's hurt. But with the way that Justice Winslow has been playing lately, I don't understand the hesitation to start him at point. Not only does he say that he wants to play more point, but the numbers show that's where he thrives. So throwing Tyler Johnson out there is frustrating. And by the time Spo put Justice out there, they were already down like 10-0, and all of the momentum was in Utah's favor. They were having to rely on a lot of outside shots because, frankly, they couldn't really get anything done inside. Bam was having a real hard time tonight. Basically, there's no way to spin anything good out of this game. It was just god-awful from start to finish. And it really sucks, man, because this team had been sort of trending in a pretty good direction. Granted, Phoenix really sucks, and no one can out-tank Phoenix. They're just the bottom of the barrel. But we still, did a really good job against them. And then the Clippers, who are one of the best teams in the West, we completely smoked them. And it was feeling, in LA, it was feeling pretty good. And even with that Lakers loss, it was a 3-point loss. It was a close game. And we all know, we can be honest. We're here for Wade this season. That's kind of what this season is about. But at the same time, I think we can all agree that if Wade weren't out there at the end of the game, we probably would have won that. I'm not upset at that. I think that was the correct call because that is clearly Wade's moment. This season is kind of Wade's moment, so you want to give him those opportunities to be able to make a big shot. And, he came up short in the end there. But it was an awesome game. I don't think anyone felt bad about that. So to come into Utah, who is also a
underachieving team compared to how they were last year, and then to just be this dominated. I mean, holy hell, man. I can't believe I'm stuck having to give commentary for a shit game like this. I don't know what I did to deserve this, but I'm sorry. I don't want to ramble on forever here, but what I will say, yes, this loss was awful. And yes, the last couple games, that's obviously a small sample size to whatever's going on this season because we're many games under 500 at this point. However, I still think that this is a playoff team, a very, very low seed playoff team, but I still think we're going to make it. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that don't really believe in that, and they want to tank, and they want to get a pick, they want to get a lottery pick. Listen, man, I get it. If we lose, that's fine, as long as the guys out there losing are the guys that you want to actually get minutes from. Now, in Spo's defense, outside of Rodney Magruder at 29 minutes, the next few players with the highest minute totals tonight are Justice at 28. You had Bam at 27 because Hassan is still out dealing with the birth of his new little tyke. You had Kelly Olynyk at 27 minutes, Derek Jones Jr. at 26, and Josh Richardson at 25. So the kids did play tonight, but it's often kind of disheartening to have a starting lineup out there without your best team. And I think I could speak for most of us at Heatbeat, and we're just wondering what the fuck. And don't let this game fool you. Justice still better.
Also this week, Giancarlo Navas had the chance to recap the Heat-Lakers game that featured the final time that LeBron James and Dwayne Wade will play each other in the regular season.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the very first edition of My Patron Shot. I'm your host, Giancarlo Navas. And with me today, there is nobody. I'm from the Heat Beat podcast, and we are here, fresh off Heat Lakers, talking about that awesome game. The final time Dwayne Wade and LeBron play each other, LeBron has the edge, 16-15. That game, before going into tonight, they were tied. It was a 15-15 record. And tonight was a tiebreaker for all the marbles. And LBJ came up with the win late. I can't think of a cooler way to end their tenure as opponents, right? So you have LeBron guarding Dwayne at the top of the key at the end of the game. Dwayne needs a three. LeBron knows it. I guess that kind of made it crappy because, there was no threat of Dwayne going to the basket, and LeBron knew that. But still, Dwayne heaved up a shot. It didn't go in. By the way, Justice Winslow had a great look to send that game into overtime, which I would have gone nuts. And Dwayne had a couple looks that were halfway down with a minute left. So, man, this season is only about moments like that. We're not going to look back and because they were, a tough first round out to, the Toronto Raptors. That's not going to matter. What's going to matter is stuff like tonight. I know I'm going to remember this. And I know it's just a stupid regular season game. But probably the two most important players in franchise history. Yes, and I'm putting LeBron in that conversation over Alonzo, over Shaquille, over Tim Hardaway, over Udonis. Those are the two most important players in franchise history. And they're going at it at the end of a game, back and forth for the last time. And D-Wade was awesome in that second half, and I cannot think of something I want more. That's what sports is about. It's about those moments. It's about stuff it's about these narratives like that. And I know, probably should Dwayne have played the whole fourth quarter? Probably not the best decision. However, what's important here is, damn, that was so cool. And who cares? It doesn't matter. Okay, Derek Jones Jr. is guarding LeBron. Probably not the best idea. But whatever, dude. Like, that was a lineup that had the energy, and it let D Wade cook, and that's all that mattered, you know. I did want to touch a little bit about Justice Winslow, because if Justice has indeed turned a corner, and since Thanksgiving he has been the Heat's best player. I mean, his statistics are like, they're bonkers right now. Tonight he had a career high. He's shooting so well. Like, I am very confident when he shoots the ball now. Kind of similar toward the end of last season, where he was shooting the ball really well. He had a kind of slump to start the season, but his shooting is rounding into form, and his finishing, I think that's been critical, because like, he's getting to the rim and like making like tough layups. Like, he's finishing with contact, he's finishing over guys. And if we look at the Justice Winslow experience, I mean, we can see a guy that A, is a very good ball handler, B, a very good decision maker, very good passer, C, the guy is an all-world defender. He has the size, he has the build, he has the strength, he has everything. He's a smart guy. He has everything but the putting the ball in the damn basket part down. And it would appear that he is figuring out the putting in the basket. Like, this isn't a guy that's like Tony Allen, right? That like Tony Allen was just like a severely limited player who's a great defender. Like, Justice does all like basketball things. Like, he can create, initiate offense, dribble, like trigger sets. Justice is not one of those like defense only guys, right? Like, Justice is like a good offensive player because he can create offense and dribble and get to the paint and penetrate. He just couldn't finish, right? So like, he gets like all the way up until the end and then can't do anything. So the fact that he's turning a corner, like, I remember on our podcast, you know, people wanted to make the Kawhi comp, and we always felt that maybe Andre Iguodala would be a better comp. A guy like a Swiss Army knife type of guy. And as long as he, you know, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask Justice to be an above league average finisher if he's not being asked to do it that much, to pick his spots. Same with the shooting. Like, they don't need him to be Andre Iguodala in Philadelphia. They need him to be Andre Iguodala in Denver, Andre Iguodala in Golden State. And I think that's kind of a career trajectory that's like, you can look forward to. Like, that's a guy that was an all-star. That's a guy that's like has a lot of talent. That's really freaking good. That's valuable. And Justice on that contract looks to be that way. And I think that that's huge. I think that's huge for the organization, and I think that's huge for him. And we're going to have all that and a lot more on the Miami Heat Beat podcast, which is, you can catch it every week here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Check out me, Alf, Brian, Alex, Kate, Leif, Christian, Nikias, you know, everybody on our crew, Brass. We have a whole library of personalities and talents. So check us out every week at MIA Heat Beat, and I'm Giancarlo Navas at GNavas103 on Twitter. Thank you all for my patron shot.
We don't like to compliment him too much, but good stuff there from Giancarlo Navas of Miami Heat Beat. Check out their podcast. Now, actually, big news this week centered around the Miami Hurricanes and their defensive coordinator, Manny Diaz, departing after 3 years as DC to be the head coach at Temple. Here was my immediate reaction after the news. On Wednesday, Yahoo and The Athletic reported that Temple is close to hiring University of Miami defensive coordinator Manny Diaz as their next head coach. I'm really happy for Manny Diaz. I thought he could have and maybe should have gotten the job his now predecessor Jeff Collins got as head coach of Georgia Tech. Maybe at Kansas State. A lower-level Power 5 job is what he deserved based on his work. I will say, though, I totally understand Manny Diaz wanted to take a job as a head coach because Temple has been a springboard. Even if Al Golden didn't work at Miami, he got the Miami job on evidence of his work at Temple. Jeff Collins just got the job at Georgia Tech. Steve Adazio got the job at Boston College. Matt Rule got the job at Baylor. Temple has been one of these springboard programs where if you have some success in the American, particularly given their history, you're getting a lot of credit for that. And so I totally understand that there are two routes to getting a high-level Power 5 job. One is you continue dominating as a coordinator, maybe getting some head coaching experience. I think of Joe Moorhead, who is now the head coach of Mississippi State, was a great coordinator at Penn State and managed to get that high-level job. Clearly, Manny Diaz did not get one of those jobs that he would have wanted, so he's taken the Temple job, which basically, based off recent evidence, has been a guaranteed springboard towards success. So I get it for Manny, and I'm happy for him. But when you look at for Miami, I don't think Mark Richt brought back the University of Miami program for a brief four-month period in which they beat Notre Dame, in which they beat Virginia Tech, and were ranked number 2 in the playoff rankings, and everyone was excited about this program again. It was Manny Diaz, because Miami did not do that on the back of offense. Their offense, even as they were having success, even as Malik Rozier was doing enough, as Mark Walton was a really good running back, as they were surviving with Travis Homer, as Zaman Richards gave you 1 out of 6 good games, as Chris Herndon and Braxton Berrios were reliable pass-catching targets, that offense was decent. It wasn't great. It was their defense. It was all the things that you've come to love about Miami and all the characteristics that are associated with it. The swagger, obviously the turnover chain is the face of it, but it's well beyond that. It's hitting with force. It's playing defense the way that great Miami defenses have played it, and then talking about how we're going to kick your ass and then kicking your ass. Like, that was their defense for the first 10 games of that season, and why everyone was so excited, because and I think back, and I remember a couple of moments as it relates to that. First is obviously the pick 6 from Trajan Bandy against Notre Dame. It's still, I get chills thinking about it. A smile comes across my face because it was such an iconic moment. I can't remember a stadium ever being that loud, and I was in the arena for the Ray Allen shot. Now, I'm one of the people that left my seat early. In my defense, I was working. But I have not experienced a noise like that noise. And I remember watching back the Virginia broadcast, that when Miami scored a defensive touchdown in that game, Holly Rowe, the sideline reporter, brought a noise meter with her and said that the noise was like the noise that came from the stadium was louder for the pick 6 than it was for a deep pass that went for a touchdown for Miami in that game. The defense is what brought back all this feeling with this program. The aggressiveness, Miami athletes playing like Miami athletes in the style in which Miami athletes play at high school, and most of all, success. That identity, I think it can be overstated at times that Miami is a unique program, that these specific things that Miami were when they were good need to be the things that they're good at now in the present. There's a little bit of too much clinging on to the past and what made Miami good. But in the end, high school players in Miami are taught to play defense in a certain way, and the athletes respond to a particular way of defense. And as much as you can say that, okay, maybe if Nick Saban came in and wanted to play Nick Saban's way, and Nick Saban's way was different than how Miami is, he would still have success here because he's Nick Saban. But I still think I think Miami fans can spot an outsider from a mile away. And I can't recommend enough going back and checking out on the 5 Rings podcast here in the 5 Reasons Sports Network, Manny Diaz's interview, because you can just feel it oozes Miami and the Miami story and what it's like to be a Miami Hurricanes fan growing up, going to the Orange Bowl. And he had, of any defensive coordinator that this program could potentially have, other than former players, more on that in a moment, of any defensive coordinator that is out there in the coaching pool right now, a deeper understanding of what it is like for the Miami defense to be what it's supposed to be, and the specific way to coordinate it to get the most out of it. I don't think that there are very many other qualified candidates to coordinate this defense in exactly the way that Manny Diaz did. And I think you saw with Mark D'Onofrio the complete opposite of that and what it can't look like. And so I think the issue for Mark Richt now becomes, when his offense has no identity at the moment, when I don't know next year who the quarterback is going to be, how they're planning to win games, and how they're planning to bring an offense to this program that scores 35 points a game, which is a bare minimum in college football now. If you don't have that offense, and then you lose your identity on defense because you're losing part of your secondary, you've now lost your defensive coordinator to Temple. If you've lost everything, then what do you have? And is this program now fully regressed, and is it really truly the fever dream over of 2017, and now you're kind of right back to square one? Because if Manny Diaz is what made it special again, and he's not there anymore, unless you bring in someone comparable, or you bring in a former player that understands all this, then I don't know where you go from here. And so I thought Ethan Skolnick made a great point on Twitter, which was, why not give a former player? I mean, the number of defensive professionals that have come through this program, how are there not a full factory line of former players ready to come through and coach this program? You have Mike Rumpf, who's part of the program now, but give Ed Reed a shot. I'm serious. I think Ed Reed, without any coaching experience, I'd love to see that as defensive coordinator of this program, because let's be honest, Ed Reed's not going to be a grad assistant. Ed Reed is not going to even be a safeties coach. I think give him a call and see if he wants to be the defensive coordinator and pay him the same amount of money that you were paying to Manny Diaz. I think these are the kinds of ideas that need to be brought forth, because bringing in any old defensive coordinator from an up-and-coming school that played good defense last year, maybe has good ideas about how to defend the spread, unless you have that bedrock of Miami, I think you're up against it. I'm not saying it can't work, because I think it's a little too naive and perhaps even arrogant to say that only Miami guys can work in Miami, but it's just such a built-in advantage that Manny Diaz had from the very beginning that I think that if he was able to bring in now, that Mark Richt is able to bring in now, at the very least on that side of the ball, it still looks like Miami while you figure out the offense. But I think if you lose the qualities of the defense, then it really is just every team in the last 15 years. And you look towards 2019, Miami was adrift this year. They're a program that offensively was so bad that they were able to ruin a top 20 defense. And it's probably even better than that by some of the metrics, by just the eye test. Miami had a damn good defense this year, which is why Manny Diaz is getting this job on the back of a 7-5 season. Miami went 7-5 and their defensive coordinator is being plucked away, and that just highlights what a good job he did. Programs are too smart to say, well, they were 7-5. Now, if anyone watched this defense, you knew that this is a coach on the rise that had a speed bump at the University of Texas, where maybe he wasn't a fit for there. And maybe Manny Diaz won't be a fit for Temple, but I think he is more than deserving of this opportunity. Unless Miami threw a ton of money at him, I don't know how you were going to convince him to stay, because it's a head coaching opportunity. And for upwardly mobile coaches, unless the Hurricanes are ready to get rid of Mark Richt already, which I don't think they're anywhere close to, this was going to happen. Now, the question is, do you have a plan in place, a coach in mind that is going to prevent the program from going adrift to being lost at sea? And that is the huge next step for this University of Miami program, because everything that, for me, has really been built in the Mark Richt era can largely be credited to Manny Diaz. I'm sad to see him go, but I'm happy for him. Best of luck at Temple, Manny Diaz. And now I want to close with a couple of Patron-exclusive shows. The first is with a South Florida media staple, we'll call him. You might not know him, but he is a cameraman that I swear to you, everywhere that I have been covering events, this man is here for Channel 4, Luis Zabala. They like to call it the goat cheese. He calls himself the goat because he's a fairly self-aggrandizing gent. So check out Ethan Skolnick and Luis Zabala with the latest on South Florida sports.
Welcome back to the 5 Reasons Sports Patron feed. I'm Ethan Skolnick, co-host of the 5 Reasons Sports podcast and co-founder of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Usually I'm with Chris Whittingham, but for our episodes of Goat Cheese with the GOAT, Luis Zabala from CBS 4, you catch him on the sidelines at Dolphin games and all over South Florida as a cameraman for CBS 4. Also check out previous episodes with myself and him here on this particular podcast feed. And we're going to do this quickly today. We're going to touch on 3 major topics in South Florida. Let's start with what's going on with Manny Diaz. We've got another patron shot from Chris Whittingham about this, but Manny's supposed to be introduced as the new coach of Temple at 3 o'clock today, Lou. What are your feelings about this? What, if anything, could or should Miami have done to prevent this?
Well, to be honest with you, my first thoughts on what happened with Manny Diaz were I couldn't believe it. Like, I couldn't believe he's going to go to Temple. But it is a head coaching job, and I can't believe that the University of Miami didn't step up to try to keep him. Because as we know, in college football, sometimes your assistants are the ones that do a lot of the work when it comes to recruiting and finding the talent. And obviously their defense has been way, way above the offense at the University of Miami. And I was kind of a little bit surprised that they didn't do a better job of trying to keep Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz is a Miami guy. I mean, his dad was the freaking mayor. I mean, the guy carries a little bit of weight in this town. The guy, he knows his way around here. He's very good. I'm interested to see how long he spends at Temple, because as you've seen, it's been a pretty big springboard for a lot of coaches. But I was kind of shocked. I was kind of surprised that they didn't make a better run at keeping Manny Diaz as the defensive coordinator here. And all this talk about coach and waiting and all that, I don't like that crap. That stuff does not work. Look, Jimbo Fisher was coach and waiting, and how long did he last as a head coach at FSU? He got out of there. And so I don't like those titles of coach and waiting. I just, I think money talks when it comes to football coaches. And if your high-paid assistants are being well taken care of, then I don't think you lose them. So I think UM probably could have done a better job of keeping Manny Diaz here.
So let's get into the money aspect of this, because that's been brought up to me for people who are inside the program, that they've got some overruns. They didn't have a ton of money to spend. And of course, what's looming out there is that they really need an offensive coordinator. Like, yeah, I mean, before they lost their defensive coordinator, they needed an offensive coordinator. I don't know if Rick is going to go for that or not. I don't know if he can keep throwing his son out there as quarterbacks coach. Obviously, clearly that hasn't worked. I mean, 3 of the 4 quarterbacks got suspended this year, and the other one wasn't very good. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is where does Rick and the program go from here? Because we just did with Chris Fisher from NBC6, we just did our top 5 stories of the year in South Florida, and I had number 3 mark the loss of confidence from the fan base in Mark Richt. Like, that has turned quickly. So where do they go? Where does he go from here? How does he win the fan base back if they've just lost the coordinator who was responsible for most of the success that they've had over the past 2 years? And as of now, there's no offensive coordinator candidate on the horizon.
Well, I think the biggest issue that has happened with UM's offense is that their offensive line is just not good. And one of the guys that he brought in to supposedly secure that hasn't done the job. That they're not getting good offensive linemen. They're just not good. I mean, I've spoken to people inside the program, and that's the biggest problem. And you know what? It's not sexy to talk about offensive line, but if your offensive line sucks, your quarterback's going to look bad. And if your quarterback looks bad, your receivers are going to look bad. And if your receivers look bad, your running backs look bad. And guess who looks bad? The offensive coordinator. You can call whatever plays you want, but if you don't have the talent up front to run the plays, then look at the situation with the Dolphins. They've been mixing guys in and out and have managed to survive with what they have. That's a good coach. You know what I'm saying? If you can manage to survive with what the Dolphins have been dealing with, the UM's not dealing with injuries. UM's just doesn't have the talent.
It's just incompetence. Right. It's not injuries. Right.
And there's no excuse here in Miami to not be able to recruit talent. I understand it's speed. Well, guess what? If it's speed, then play to speed. Mm-hmm. Don't play the pro-style offense. Don't do that stuff. You got to go to the college offenses. You have the quarterbacks to do it. We talked about N'Kosi Perry when he started that, when he came in against FIU. I told you, when he came in there, it looked different. Mm-hmm. The guy looked different. You could tell who the superstar was on the field. Now, is the guy kind of a little knucklehead? Is he a kid? You know what I mean? Well, you know what I'm saying? Okay, but whose fault is that? Who's supposed to deal with those type of things? Well, your head coach, your offensive coordinator, your quarterback's coach, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the guys that got to keep these kids in check. They're the ones that deal with them the most.
And they're all Ricks. they're all Ricks.
Well, I don't throw it all on the head coach all the time, but in this case, the quarterback's coach is the head coach's kid. Yep. He's responsible for those guys. And like you said, it's the group that has given him the most trouble. Mm-hmm. And when have you ever heard, well, besides Will Greer, Florida, and I don't want to bring that up, but when have you ever heard of the quarterback being the knucklehead?
Mm-hmm. Right. No, it's a real issue. And I think what's a real issue, you mentioned recruiting. I mean, they had a guy here in Manny Diaz who was the perfect guy for recruiting. I mean, he brought back the sort of this swagger that we always talk about with UM. I mean, the defense brought it back, not the offense. The defense did. The
turnover chain was the star of the program.
Exactly. And that's him. And I just, I polled this yesterday at 5 Reasons Sports, and 70% of Canes fans would prefer that Manny was the head coach right now. I don't know if he was ready for that or not, but clearly, look, they bought into the Rick thing last year. I understand it. They were 10-0. They gave him an extension, but I'm always concerned about these extensions that are given out at certain points, because we see so many of them are regretted within 6 months, and I think this one is regretted. Let's move to the second topic here, and the Marlins. We've got Craig Mish out in Las Vegas right now, posting on
all
over it. Swings and misses. Check it out. He's on Periscope. I think he's a hostage somewhere in the Luxor Hotel. But he's posting all this stuff on Real Muto. He keeps changing his odds a little bit because the players change here. I think the last we talked about it was maybe Braves, Mets, and Reds in that order. He's kind of had the Braves sort of at the forefront. He's very connected on this stuff. He basically tweeted this morning that JT may not get traded in the winter meetings, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. He also had JT's agent on his podcast basically saying, look, JT wants out. Okay, he'll sign an extension somewhere else. So how do you think this plays out?
All right. Here's what I've been hearing, and this is from sources in baseball as well. I do have some. It's a position where, Ethan, people are cautious to give big money to. because it's a tough position, catcher. I mean, his agent is Buster Posey's agent. If anybody should know that, it's Buster Posey's agent, right? Mm-hmm. Look what happened. You think San Fran, they had a huge contract on him. The guy, they lost him for a whole season. So now you're paying a guy for a whole season and he's not even playing because he got hurt. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying you got to be – everybody looks at it's a slam dunk deal. Why wouldn't you pay JT Realmuto all this money? Why wouldn't you? You know why you wouldn't? Because you don't have to yet. Because the team has control, and that's the way baseball works. Now, people don't look – the one thing that hasn't been mentioned is, it sounds great to give him this huge contract because he is the best catcher in the major leagues right now, but there's a risk behind that position. And I think teams are getting smarter. They're counting the odds. The Braves caught lightning in a bottle with all these young guys, and their program got turned around real quick. Now, they can afford to do it because they have a lot of talent and a lot of young talent, right? So this guy seems like a perfect fit for the Braves. Now, the Mets, they've always been a crazy organization. They're up, they're down, they're broke, they're not. So it's a little bit more of a risk for a team like that to take. The thing with JT, I think if the Marlins are smart, why not wait till the All-Star break? Why not wait till there is a team that says, man, we could win with this guy, And then all these prospects that they're trying to hold on to, that other organizations are trying to hold on to now, now you might be able to pry one away or two away if they really want to win right now. So why deal them now? I mean, there's no reason. And agents are always going to say what agents say because that's the best interest of their client. But JT, the bottom line is, if the Marlins want him to be a Marlin, he's going to be a Marlin because he has no other choice. You know what I'm saying? He's not going to hold out. He's not going to sit out because his value, who knows what happens to his value. Obviously, he's the best catcher, one of the best catchers in baseball. So I thought I thought they'd be able to make a deal because teams would be like, here, take whatever you want. You know what I'm saying? But then someone, one of my sources told me, hey, it's not that simple because of the risk involved in that position. And it's something that I don't think anybody has brought up. You know what I mean?
That's true. I think the best point that Mish has made about JT's value has been the idea of the ballpark, right? So if you look at JT's numbers from last year, he was a much better road player than home player, okay, right, in terms of his power numbers. So I think what we may see here, and this is going to annoy Marlins fans to no end, is we may see a Yelich situation where the power numbers go up simply because he gets the hell out of here. And
here's another thing. Even worse. It's not that simple. It's who's around him right now.
Right. There's no one. There's no one behind him. Right. And
he's coming into his own now. Yeah, he's coming into his own now. That's fine. But some of his best numbers were when they had Stanton and Yelich and Ozuna, and then he was batting what, sixth? Then they moved him up to second batter. They were moving him all around, but he was surrounded by a lot of good hitters.
Right. And he fell apart. If you look at his numbers after the All-Star game last year, he kind of fell apart a little bit after the All-Star game. I think that what happened is that a lot of pitchers figured out how to pitch him in that lineup. So I understand it. But I think Mish made the best point before we move on to the Dolphins. I think Mish made the best point about this. He's like, okay, so as soon as they trade JT, the clean slate is there.
That's when it starts.
He's like, that's when it starts. He's like, everybody's gone. What did you do? Where are these prospects how are they going to pan out? And I saw that Baseball America, I think of their top 10 prospects, I think 6 of them have been acquired in these trades that they've made. So we'll see what the prospects are that they acquire now. But basically he's like, look, the honeymoon is over at this stage. We understand it's going to take time. We get that. Okay, well, nobody's expecting 90 wins this season. But like the rest of it, like, no, from here, you're being judged. Okay, from here.
But you know what, Ethan? I don't even know why it came to this, because if I were the Marlins, and I remember asking Jeter, and we brought this up before, I remember asking Jeter, have you reached out to the players? I said, well, this year I didn't really talk to any players. I stood back and watched. I thought that was a mistake. Okay, we should have gone to JT Realmuto and said, here's our plan. This is what we're gonna do. In 2 or 3 years, okay, I'll guarantee you we're gonna be bop. If he's that confident about his skills and his direction of the ball club, and in 2 or 3 years, JT's gonna be 29, 30, okay? And if you're in your prime right there as a catcher, and you have a chance to win here, they should have made him the face. They should have said, you're gonna be the face. You're gonna do this. You're gonna be in charge of bringing the culture here and doing this and doing that. What type of ball player are you? Are you that type of person? And they should have known then and there if that's the case. So it shouldn't have even come to this. Obviously, they have control of him, so they didn't have to do that. But I think they should have done that because you know what? The fan base here, it's what you said. How many people are smart enough to say, okay, now it really starts? Or are they just going to say, oh, wow, they're getting rid of JT Realmuto now? Now what?
Right.
Because
Well, probably the latter, Lou. Probably the latter. I mean, that's the way it works here. I mean, and there's no question. And again, I get that, and I'm going to understand completely the frustration with it. And a lot of it will depend on what kind of prospects. I will say this: there does seem to be I wouldn't say a bidding war, but they definitely have multiple teams involved in this. The teams have kind of shifted day to day. They should, but it's not. I felt like with a couple of the others that like where they were kind of, and with Stanton, it wasn't their fault because there were places he wouldn't go. But but with some of the others, I felt like they're kind of competing with themselves here. Here, it does seem like they've got other teams. All right, let's switch real quick here. Our number 3 thing here on Goat Cheese, the Dolphins. I'm calling it the shock at the Rock. Miami Miracle does nothing for me. Miami Miracle, they're not even in Miami.
I like the shock of the Rock.
The shock at the Rock is better. Miami Gardens Miracle, is more legitimate than Miami Miracle. We're not going to call it that.
Did you hear our post game interview with Kiko Alonso after?
No. What did he call it?
What did he say about Tannehill?
No.
He said Tannehill has big balls, grandes cojones. That's what he said, live on TV.
Live on TV. Only on CBS 4.
It was a glorious moment.
So how do they carry this over? How do they? I feel like they've created a memory, which is great. Okay, so in 40 years, just like the '72 team, they'll be dragging. Who is the guy? Who is
Greg Camarillo? It's Greg Camarillo all over again.
But they'll be dragging Ted Larson back to talk about the block, right? Like he was the one with the block at the end, because that's what they do. The Dolphins, they live in the past for decades. That tends to be their history. But at least they have a memory from this season. Now they're going to Minnesota to play a team that is not playing well. Just fired their offensive coordinator. Kirk Cousins has been, a huge guaranteed money disappointment this stage. They're not scoring. They're wasting a really good defense. But we know the Dolphins historically in this spot have been bad on the road, and under Adam Gase and Ryan Tannehill have been really bad on the road. How do they win on Sunday? Well,
what I'm seeing is that the wide receivers are getting healthy now. Okay, the wide receivers are getting healthy. The running game with Frank, Frank has been amazing, and everybody asked Gase yesterday, hey, so did you expect Frank Gore to do? And he said yes. And I don't know if he expected him to be this good, but I'll give him this. He did start him, and when everybody was asking why isn't Drake playing more? Why isn't Drake playing more? Well, Frank has carried the load. He's been fine. You know what I'm saying? So how do they win up there? Well, the other question I was asking yesterday in the locker room to all the players was, did you guys watch the Monday night game? And everybody was like, yeah, we watch it. I said, well, how does Seattle shut down that offense? Because all you hear about is Thielen, and you hear about, Cook, and you hear about the tight end and how good that offense is. And Seattle shut them down. That game was a total shutdown. And they didn't really – they were like, well, Seattle's a good defense, and they were playing at home. And so I think they're kind of downplaying it, but I think they know that there's turmoil up there in Minnesota, and something's not right, right? And this defense has been, bend but not break. Let's put it that way, because people put up numbers against the Dolphins, but they have a hard time scoring. They've probably scored more on the damn offense than they have on the defense in all those games where they, like Cincinnati, where they blew it, games like that on the road where they've blown games where they should have won against the Colts. They played really well, and they blew it. So I think the health of these wide receivers, with Devontae Parker, Kenny finally, breaking out again. I think that they've found something here where they've gotten Tannehill comfortable, and when he's in rhythm and he's playing well, and the offensive line, they have a chip on their shoulder. Yesterday Laramie Tunsil was arguing with Omar about, I haven't really given up a sack. That was a, and so, those guys are aware. Those guys are aware that they got to piece it together and be strong up front. And I think they've done a pretty good job with what they've, with what they have. Let's be honest. Look at all the people they've lost. Mm-hmm. And they're in the middle of this. And now a game where you would think, oh, Minnesota easily favored. It's not such an easily favored game now. It's not like the Dolphins are being counted out, which to me is pretty incredible with all the injuries that they sustained. And now with the running game, you see a guy like Bolden come in out of nowhere, and Gase admits, well, I should have probably played him more. He probably should have been. But how? How do you play him more when you're having so much trouble, with the running game?
Well, when you're also not even playing Drake. I mean, that's what I mean. Like you're not using that many carries. And Frank Gore is. I saw the stat from Pro Football Focus this week. He's fourth in their running back ratings of anybody in the NFL right now. So
he always gets 4 yards.
Yeah, I know. No, he gets what's there. He gets what's there, and that is, look, I will give Gase credit on that. I've been frustrated by the Kenyon Drake thing all year, but he does
Trust me, he's on my fantasy team. Right?
I can imagine. Yeah, but I understand it because I get it, because at least you want some reliability there. But yes, Tannehill more comfortable. I know the Dolphins have been in this spot before. I just think, when you look at the totality of it, we've gotten a little carried away because of one incredibly executed once-in-a-lifetime play. But the offense did play well for the rest of that game.
But you know what, Ethan, think about this. If Kenny Stills doesn't slide at a yard short of a first down,
you don't need that play, right?
They're on that drive. That drive is moving. I mean, I was there. They were not going to be – they were going to score on that drive, all right? That was the biggest brain fart, all right, of the whole game. And then he has a chance later on to catch a third down pass, and he drops that too. So the miracle, I mean, obviously, I was already set up for post game. I as soon as that pass interference got called in the end zone on Minkah Fitzpatrick, I mean, there was not much time left. I had to go set up for our post game. So I watched the end of the thing on a TV screen with Bocamper underneath the stadium.
Right. Yeah, it's always crazy how that plays out. I remember being in New England when the Dolphins dropped that game. Was it 02 or 03, at the very end of the season? In the frigid cold, with Alinda Murray kicking the ball out of bounds and Travis Minor screwing up and Fiedler throwing for Chambers 3 straight times.
I think I was at a bowl game for that, like a meaningful one.
Yeah, well, this one, that was one of the weirder circuits, and I remember watching it in a closet. They had like a TV in a closet because they sent us downstairs too early, so that was just a strange circumstance. So I will just say this real quick here. We got 30 seconds. Do they win on Sunday?
I think they win on Sunday. I think they stop this whole road thing, and I think they come together and they win on Sunday. I mean, I could see it happening. I could see Devontae Parker having one of those games like he had in Indianapolis, and putting it together with the other guys around him. You know what I mean? Not just him, which in that game it was just him. So I can see it happen.
I'm going to pick them also on Sunday, and I know that goes against type for me since I've been so negative on them all year. But Minnesota, something's not right there right now. Something is just not right. All right, check out the next episode of Goat Cheese. I'm not sure when it'll be, but it will be soon. Also, again,
was that Gouda? Was that Swiss?
Was Parmesan? We're going. It's the Parmigiana episode, which again I have got some in my refrigerator. My daughter poured. It's like she doesn't eat like actual pasta. She just eats Parmesan with a little pasta sprinkled underneath it.
I got news for you. All kids do that. All right.
I got you.
It tastes good, Ethan. That's why it tastes good.
I got you. Well, I'll get her some chocolate instead. All right, Louis. We will talk to you soon. Follow him at the Wawitos on Twitter. And we'll be back with you next week.
And to close here, Ethan Skolnick wrote a book in the last couple of years on youth sports and the way in which the parents can interact, and interviewed a lot of top athletes about how parents can better raise their children to play in sports. He's been doing a podcast series all for the book. Check out a little snippet of those conversations.
Welcome into the 5 Reasons Sports Patron feed. I'm Ethan Skolnick, co-host of the 5 Reasons Sports podcast and co-founder of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm also the co-author of a book called Raising Your Game with Dr. Andrea Korn, a book that we wrote a few years ago, but all of it still applies. In fact, some of it still applies more than it used to. If you want to find the book, go to Amazon, just type in Raising Your Game book, and you will find it. You also find all of the 5-star reviews. We've done a number of these patron hits about youth sports. Today, we're going to focus on the parents' role in terms of sort of coaching your child through some disappointment, through some adversity, and what are the best ways to do this. And one example, Andrea, that I'm going to use to start, and then I'll let you touch on sort of the psychological significance of this, is Chipper Jones, who now, since we've written the book, has gone into the Hall of Fame. I think we have like 22 Hall of Famers in our book now. Everybody we wrote about ended up in the Hall of Fame at some later stage. And Chipper talked about a time when he was playing ball as a kid. He was in a youth league, and there was a runner on third base. His father was the third base coach, and Chipper was at the plate, and there was 2-strike count, and Chipper basically left the bat on his shoulders, did not swing. And his father's attitude at that point could have been to scold him and say, "What are you doing there, Chipper?" Okay, I don't know if he was calling him Chipper or Larry at the time, but whatever it was, "What are you doing there? You need to swing the bat." But he didn't get on him in quite that way. He was much more encouraging, and he just said, basically, "You'll do it next time." And Chipper, over the course of his career, always remembered that advice. And I remember the last at bat. I think actually we talked right after this, Andrew. The last at bat of his professional career. I think he beat out a single or reached on an error basically on a 2-strike count. Okay, basically a ball that he swung at that wasn't really in the zone, but he didn't leave the bat on his shoulder. And we have a lot of examples of that in the book, of coaching your child through difficulty, through adversity, understanding that things are not always going to go well. We see that every week in the NFL or NBA, Major League Baseball, that athletes, even the best, even LeBron James misses shots at the end, Michael Jordan missed lots of shots at the end, but I think it's the encouragement and what you do afterwards with a child that's so important.
Well, that's absolutely true. And just to add on to Chipper's story, he also shared with you an example of when he was in 9th grade, starting high school, his parents moved and they sent him to boarding school, and he had come from a small town to the big city, and he was at this very impressive school, and he considered himself this country boy, didn't know anyone, felt out of place until they saw him on the athletic field, and they saw what he could do with a bat in his hand, and all of a sudden he gained all this respectability. All of a sudden he became very popular, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to know him. And what it talked about, going to what your example was, is that Chipper always believed in himself. His father gave him that confidence, trust in yourself. You can do it. And even when you strike out, there's always going to be a next time. And so Chipper carried that with him to school. And it's usually, for kids, it's around the 10, 12, 14-year-old age range when they've been playing well for a long time, but when they start to go into early puberty, and all kids start to develop at different ages and different stages, and some kids develop earlier than others, some start growing, sooner than others. It's where kids all of a sudden start to doubt themselves. They start to lose confidence in their capabilities. And this is where a parent's support, love, and encouragement is so vital, because anyone at any moment in time, especially in sports, as you said, even in a game, the best player in the world could be playing phenomenally and then miss a shot at the end of the game. And so it's critical for parents to be able to help their child learn to believe in themselves, because what we're really talking about also is intrinsic motivation, because that's often what propels a young athlete to want to get better, to do the best they can, to know that some days it's not going to go well. Some days they are going to struggle. Some events may be very difficult, or if they pick up a new sport, but to believe in themselves that with hard work, practice, effort, perseverance, they can get there. And even Jimmy Rollins, in this chapter that we're discussing, quoting him, he says, if you can teach a kid to believe in him or herself first and foremost, then the other stuff doesn't matter. Teach a kid self-esteem first. It'll go further than any coach or any parent screaming when they are giving instructions, because as we know, negative reinforcement usually doesn't work. If anything, it ends up hurting and taking away from a young athlete. So I'll let you add on, because I know I just sort of rambled.
Oh, that's all good stuff. And I think that is the key point, is allowing the child to believe in him or herself. And how does the child do that if you're berating the child every time they make a mistake? And so that's what we're trying to get parents away from doing. And I want to cite another example, as I often do, with my daughter, now that I'm with her every weekend, at ice skating on Sundays and at soccer on Saturdays. And, I've mentioned, I think, many times here on the podcast, this other child who's in her soccer class. And this other child, has a little bit of an attention issue at times. But I've noticed a complete change depending on which other adult is watching him. So I've mentioned before that the father is there at times and is always in his phone, not to take pictures of his son, but just in his phone the whole time, or walks out for 40 minutes. The mother pays some attention, but she's paying more attention to the daughter. This past week, the grandparents were there, and I knew immediately that they were the mother's parents because this grandmother and both grandparents were there, And this grandmother watched everything that the child did, everything, and was encouraging the entire time. It is the best that this child has. We've talked about this on previous podcasts, but I got to see it for myself. It's the best this child has behaved in the soccer class the entire time. He knew someone was watching, and when he drifted off once, she's like, no, back. She did it in Spanish, but she got him back with the coach. And again, I think that's what we're trying to say. It's not that you can't tell your child to act the right way around the coach. Obviously, you want to do that. But we're talking about the process versus the result, right? And I think what happens too often, Andrea, and other examples in this book, is that the parents get angry at the result. They get angry at the child not getting a hit, okay, or dropping a ball, right, or missing a shot, or not, or all that, or letting someone on the opposing team score. Instead of, if you're going to get upset about something or instruct, it should be about the process. Why were you not paying attention to the coach? Not why did you drop the ball, okay, or why did you not do this? I think that's a key distinction.
Well, it is, and what that often leads to is then performance anxiety, because then the child may fear the next time they go out there, what if? The what ifs in the child's head is what creates this feeling of doubt, insecurity, and starting to worry. And when the focus is on the worry and not trusting in themselves, not doing the best they can, chances are it will interfere and hamper their performance. And next week, that's exactly what we're going to get into, is that there are many reasons why children could be afraid they don't do well, afraid they don't please their parents, afraid they're not going to be successful. And yet, if they don't have adversity and learn how to cope with it and deal with it and overcome it, they can never rise to their potential.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And again, as you go through this book, I was just leafing through it as we were talking. As you go through this book, you see so many of the examples that the athletes gave me when I was interviewing them was about failure, right? It's not most kids don't remember every great thing they did when they were growing up as an athlete, but they will remember the thing that went wrong. And so as they remember that, the question again is, how did the adult react to that? And a lot of the same things we're saying about the parents obviously apply to the coaches. But we know, obviously, the coaches are dealing with kids they don't know, right, in a lot of cases. Like, we talk about trying to get to know the kid. But, I mean, a coach comes in, the coach might have, on a football team, might have, 50 of the 50 players that they've got, like 30 of them might be new. It's going to be very difficult to get to know every personality. But as a parent, even if you have 5 children, I would assume you know your child, right? And so that's why we're kind of addressing the parents first. Like, that's a situation you have more control over. You don't have as much control over how a coach reacts. All you can do is be present, try to set the right example. And if you see the coach acting in a way that the coach shouldn't be acting, then you go about it that way. One more example here before we close, Andrew, about my daughter that happened this past week. So I gave her these cleats, okay, that she's not really used to, which I probably shouldn't have given her because it's an indoor facility. But basically, she wanted to try them. They're these, as she says, cute pink cleats. So she wanted to wear them. And so she's running around, not on the turf of the field, but it's sort of, there's a different kind of surface they've got right outside the field. And she trips and she bruises her knee. And the way that the coach handled that, I thought was perfect, because my daughter is limping around and this and that. And the coach was like, look, if you don't want to play right now, that's okay. If you want to wait till it gets better, but why don't you sit here and watch your teammates play? And so my daughter watched for a while and she's complaining about her knee. And then after a little while, she got up and she ran out there. And I just thought the way that the coach approached that, not like get up and get to your spot or something like that, or you're not that hurt, or something like along those lines. It was, all right, take your own time. I'm going to let you watch your teammates, and I'm betting that your knee's not so bad that you're not going to want to play, okay? And that's basically what ended up happening last week. So, again, I think so much of this, Andrea, I'll let you have the last word on this, but I think so much of this is just its demeanor, its tone, and it's letting the child know that it's okay in a certain situation to not always perform at the best or not always, feel your best, but to basically do as much as you possibly can.
Well, just to add, that coach was very attuned and somehow knew your daughter well enough that he supported the fact that take this time out, see if you can regroup and come back on the court or on the field. And if you can, great. But if you can't, it's okay. You're still part of the team. You support your teammates by being on the bench. And sometimes that's where a player has to be available to help their teammates. But also a coach has to realize that every player is coming from a different home, a different environment, a different culture, a different background, a different orientation to sports, and it does make it more complicated. But to have a coach who can be empathic, who can be understanding, who can be attuned and sensitive to what a child needs, and was very attuned to your child, so he did exactly what was needed at that moment, which is beautiful.
Yeah, no question about it. And so we'll get more to you next week here at Raising Your Game. Again, check out the Twitter handle at RYGBook. I'm going to be a little bit better about posting from that. Also, check out at Ethan J. Skolnick, at 5 Reasons Sports, and at Doc Acorn. And buy the book. That's what we really want you to do, because it's easier to follow along with what we're doing if you have the book with you and can sort of follow around chapter by chapter. We made it easier for you to kind of take you through the process from being a baby all the way up through youth sports until a kid is in high school. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the 5 Reasons Podcast. Thank you so much.